Chances are you're probably like me. You have a favorite JRPG. Let's just say it's Final Fantasy VII. I'm a huge Final Fantasy VII fan, but I'm also happy to say that, yeah, I mean, the game itself isn't perfect. And that's the cool thing about replaying these things, because over time you start to notice sections where things slow down, mechanics that might feel a little awkward, and moments where you think, oh my gosh, here we go again. So today I thought it would be really fun to kind of look at some of my favorite JRPGs and be a little bit more critical and just say, you know what, I love these games, but yeah, they're not perfect. So we're talking about the worst parts of my favorite JRPGs. And before we get to that, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're not already. Leave your thoughts down below. Let me know what you don't like about some of your favorite JRPGs as well. So let's get to the first one, which is a great game that I love to talk about often. And you know what? I'm talking about all these games probably for the millionth time again, but you know what? I thought it'd be fun to reframe it with this lens. So let's talk about Grandia. For me, Grandia is one of the most joyful JRPG adventures I've ever had. I mean, once the game opens up and the journey really begins, it really gives you that sense of exploration that is better than any other JRPG that I've played, really. I mean, Justin's story feels like a genuine coming of age kind of thing, and the world slowly expands on that in a really great way, but the opening hours take what feels like forever to get there. The early portion of the game is centered around Justin's hometown of Parm, and yes, while it is charming, and yes, it does have a bunch of personality, the pacing is definitely on the slow side. You spend a lot of time walking around, talking to the townspeople, doing some small, fetch errands, and gradually building towards that first real expedition. And it does a good job of establishing Justin's character and his sense of wonder about the outside world. And, he's obviously curious about everything, but it's just really slow to get to the why, the major why of the game. And if you play through this game again and again and again, you become very acutely aware of when the game hasn't started and when it finally kicks in after this kind of prologue phase. But once you finally set out beyond the town, the adventure really kicks into gear and Grandia becomes something really special. And it's something that totally blew me away the first time I played it. And I so regret not having played this when I was younger, but that sense of discovery becomes the heart of the entire game. But those early hours, man, they can really feel like waiting for the train to leave the station. Next up is a game that I played for the first time recently, and it was very interesting to contrast from the one that came before. Now, Dragon Quest V is a standout in Dragon Quest as a series, at least so far in my playthrough, having played 1 through 5, then 7 Reimagined, and then 11. So I've got some good experience with the game so far, but on my Dragon Quest journey so far, I thought it was interesting how you can recruit monsters that follow you around in battles. Now, as far as a narrative, it really just focuses around the hero going through multiple stages of his life, showing the world how it changes as he gets older. It's very powerful, and it allows the story to really just kind of mature over time. But it also means that the party composition kind of does change constantly. Characters join for a while and then disappear, and sometimes they just disappear for good. Others are replaced by monsters you can recruit along the way, which becomes a major part of the gameplay, of course. But because of that, some of the party members never quite get the amount of development or on-screen time that you would expect in a traditional JRPG, and you don't get that same kind of long-term bond with certain characters that you might in other Dragon Quest games as well. So what I was saying before is I had just played Dragon Quest IV before playing Dragon Quest V, and I loved the cast of 4. Everybody had their specific roles, and I don't know, I found it less charming to have monsters in my party taking place of those traditional characters. I didn't bond with them very much. They were really there to just serve the gameplay. So while I enjoyed Dragon Quest V, and it's one of my favorite Dragon Quest games so far, that being said, the rotating cast, I think, is what part of makes the story feel like a true life journey. It's a small trade-off in a game that's telling one of the most ambitious narratives in the entire series. And yes, if we do have to have monsters in our party, that's okay. But I would prefer party members. But by the end of the game, you've got your children and your wife with you pretty much if you want to roll that way too. Earthbound is one of my favorite games, if not my favorite game of all time. I mean, you followed my channel for a while. I've talked about it at length, how much I love this game, how much it means to me, all that stuff. And it's super quirky, it's very surreal, and the unforgettable music just gives it so much personality that feels completely unique, over 30 years later. But there's one glaring thing about this game that you are constantly wrestling with, and that is the inventory management. Each character only has a small number of item slots, and those slots fill up quickly, whether it be healing items items or key items or equipment, and all story objects, they just compete for the same limited space. I mean, think of if you have Jeff in your party and you wanted to use the bottle rockets because he's, the go-to item guy. Good luck holding anything else. I mean, before long, you're constantly deciding what to keep, what to store, and what you can afford to just forget. I mean, thankfully, the game gives you the Escargot Express to store everything, more or less. But even with that system, you still are finding yourself managing inventory far more often than you might like. So it's not necessarily a game-breaking issue by any means, but it's one of those little frustrations that pops up again and again and again throughout any time I've played Earthbound. And yeah, easily my least favorite thing of Earthbound. Another one of my favorite games that I talk about quite often here is Chrono Trigger, and it's got great pacing, and a big part of that is how smooth the gameplay flows in general. I mean, battles are super quick, and it's not hard to understand, and the game really rarely, if ever, requires you to grind. I think in the multiple times I've played this game, I don't think I've ever grinded, to be honest with you. You're constantly moving forward, learning new things, discovering new things in time and in the world, and you're always pushing the story ahead. But here's the thing that if I was really to truly nitpick this game, the game is designed to be accessible, and the difficulty curve stays fairly gentle throughout most of the adventure. Outside of a handful of late game encounters, a lot of things can be defeated without needing a huge amount of effort, really. But sometimes I'm just finding myself thinking, man, I wish this game was just a little bit more hard. I wish there was more of a reason for me to grind. I wish there was more of a reason for me to engage more deeply with the battle systems and all that kind of stuff. So again, if I love Chrono Trigger, and it's a game that definitely does not overstay its welcome. And you can spend some really great time with it. I really just wish the game was a little bit more challenging, a little bit more tough. It's not often that I saw the game over screen aside from like maybe the final battle, but that's really it. Still, it's hard to complain too much when the trade-off is one of the most perfectly paced JRPGs ever made. Now, hang on, before we get any further, I also wanted to let you know that almost 90% of the people that watch my channel on the regular are not subscribed. So if you like these kind of videos and you want more content every week in your YouTube subscription feed, I would love to have you. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and also I would love to know your comments on today's video as well. Anyway, more video right now. Now, here's one that I know a lot of you are going to agree with, and that is the Cloister of Trials in Final Fantasy X. Now, this game overall does a great job at building momentum as you travel across Spira on your journey. Every location adds more context to the world, and tensions get higher, stakes rise, and just overall, everything just starts to become a great build from the start of your journey on Besaid Island to the very end of the game. But almost every time that you reach a temple, the game suddenly shifts gears, and this is like the oh here we go again kind of moment for me whenever I play this game. And it's the Cloister of Trials. This basically is a puzzle game, or like a maze or whatever, where you've got to move some spheres around the rooms, unlock certain things, and figure out how the temple's internal system works, more or less. I mean, they're not bad puzzles, but they can definitely bring everything to a complete stop while you figure them out. Now, what makes it more noticeable is that these sections often appear right when the narrative is building some good tension. Instead of moving forward with the story, you're suddenly stuck solving this environmental puzzle for like what could be 20 minutes. It is a real terrible break in the middle of a great game. I mean, I'm kind of like overstating a little bit. I don't mind it that much, but it is a little bit annoying, and some of them do get pretty tough, to be honest with you. So you've got to be thinking. Honestly, you probably just have to follow a guide every time you play these, because when I was a kid and all I had was game facts or game FAQs before YouTube tutorials and all that stuff, you know what? It was really hard for me to follow those guides. So I don't know how I finished that game back in the day. It was real tough, and mostly thanks to the Cloister of Trials. It's really hard for me to nitpick Final Fantasy VII. I know, I am one of those Final Fantasy VII fanboys. I've been a fan of it since it came out, and I'm happy to say, the game isn't perfect overall, and if I was really to pick out one thing that I don't like about it is this. The opening hours are so incredibly focused. The Midgar section is so tightly paced. The stakes are super high, and the story pulls you in straight away. You're introduced to Avalanche, taking down the Mako reactors, the conflict with Shinra, the environmental themes, the political themes, like everything that defines that entire narrative. It's one of the most, if not the most memorable opening in JRPG history. But once you leave Midgar and the world map opens up, things kind of drop off, and it jumps really rapidly between major plot developments and sudden tonal shifts. I know there's a lot of people that probably agree with this. That whole Midgar section is such a high, and then you finish and now it's like, And then what? You know, you go to calm, you've got your flashback scene, and then from there you can move on to a bunch of other things, but it just doesn't feel like the story really ever hits that same high that it did in Midgar. And, you know, I've come to appreciate that. It's a quirk of Final Fantasy VII for sure. I mean, look, one moment you're tracking Sephiroth across the planet, and the next moment you're snowboarding down a mountain or spending more time at Gold Saucer because you like the mini games. You know, it's just very weirdly paced if you really want to be super objective about it. But sometimes it does feel like the story and just the game kind of drops off a little bit after Midgar. Do you agree? I'd be interested to know. And last but not least is probably the most glaring thing here, and as I've talked about many times before, maybe the biggest what if in JRPGs is Disc 2 of Xenogears. I mean, it's one of the most ambitious JRPGs ever made. So many great talking points here from this game, from philosophy to religion, politics, psychology, identity, morality. Like, it's such like every describing word that you can think of is discussed in this game in ways that very few games have ever even attempted since. And the first disc just builds that massive world filled with some of these great characters and huge story revelations. It's very dense. It's very dramatic, and it's always moving forward in a great way. I think the pacing is really well done for the first disc of Xenogears. But as soon as you pop in disc 2, it famously shows you the reality of, you know, a rushed development schedule. Instead of exploring dungeons and locations, much of the story is basically delivered to you through long stretches of narration. You have some of the main characters of the game literally sitting in a rocking chair explaining major events that would have been playable sequences earlier in the game. And I mean, the story itself is still fascinating and incredibly ambitious, but it's impossible not to imagine what Xenogears might have looked like if the entire game had the same level of development as the remarkable first half. I think my playtime for Disc 1 was 25 to 30 hours, and maybe Disc 2 was 10-ish. If that, but there is a substantial drop off in feeling of the game. I mean, that first disc really builds to something amazing, and for it to have ended the way that it did, I mean, it still ends fine and the story is still very interesting, don't get me wrong, but as I've said before on my channel many times before, it is probably my biggest what if in gaming. I wish Xenogears could get a chance at a proper remake to flesh out the story, because I think it might be the greatest JRPG of all time if it were to be complete. So that's just a couple of JRPGs with some nitpicks and, you know, the things that I don't like about them. I still think they're fantastic games. And again, not every game is totally 100% flawless and perfect. And sometimes it's hard for me to think of things that I don't like about these games because I love them so much. But, you know, it was a good exercise in figuring out, I don't like this, or I think this could have been better. So I'd be interested to know what your list would be. So let me know down below in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts. And yeah, thanks again for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on another video next week. Bye-bye.